Hello. In today's video, we're going to go a little wild and make some stuffed pumpkins. Chef's gone wild. This recipe comes from a cookbook called Kachka, which is written by a chef who runs a restaurant of the same name in Portland. And the general idea of the cookbook is the food of the Soviet Union. And we'll take a look at that and I'll dive deeper into that idea a little bit later. But this recipe is for Armenian Pumpkin Dolmas. And I tend to think of dolmas as something stuffed into grape leaves, but apparently it is any vegetable. So we're going to be using some squash, and the filling is going to be plov, which is basically rice cooked in a broth, a little bit of meat, although we're also going to do a vegetarian version. And plov is something from Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, that area, but that concept is found all over. It's basically the same root word as pilaf. So rice pilaf, very similar idea. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Take a look at all of that as we go along. Grab my towel here. To carve up these pumpkins. They get a little messy here. So this is going to be a pretty simple recipe in that there's not a lot of active work to it. We'll get these pumpkins opened up. We'll mix up the rice and pop them into our squash here, and we'll just bake it for a while in the oven. So I have two different kinds, a sugar pumpkin and a sweet dumpling squash. You can use basically any of these kind of edible squashes. So let's go ahead and open up the top of our first one here, just like Halloween. We're going to save the top. So I'm just scraping the stringy bits and seeds off of there. I'm going to go ahead and open up this fellow as well. Here. Do want to be careful, something like this. And same deal here. Clean that up a little bit. And then we're just going to scrape the insides of these out to get the goop out. Got my spoon. Just scrape around. We are, that is pretty good on squash number 1. And let's take care of our sugar pumpkin. Alright, well, the sugar pumpkin definitely put up a bit of a fight, but we're all cleaned out now and ready to mix up our rice. Okay, now let's get our rice prepared. The traditional form of the recipe would have bits of meat cooked in it, and I've got some pork for doing just that. But she also notes that you can leave that out to make a vegetarian version. And since my partner is a vegetarian, I'm going to do that version as well. So I'm going to actually make 2 batches of this. Overall, we're doing a half recipe. Normally it's done with 4 squashes, so I'm going to have everything and then have it again. So basically a quarter recipe in each. Because some of it has small volumes of spices, I'm going to measure them separately rather than doing one and trying to have it. I think it'll be easier to get them even that way. Alright, so our key first ingredient is rice. We want a long grain rice. I'm going to use some jasmine rice since that's what I have on hand. The recipe wants slightly more than 1 cup, so I'm kind of doing a rounded half cup. I'm going to do half into each here. Up next, we have some fruit. Gonna have some sour cherries, as well as some golden raisins. So for the half recipe, we're looking about an 1/8 cup. So using half of my quarter here, I'm going to add half to each, and it will be the same with these sour cherries. These cherries smell really good, mouth-watering. And again, let's add sticky, so we'll do this manually. About half to each of my bowls. Set that aside. You know, I often comment on the smells that come up from cooking, but I have to say I did not mention that for the squash portion because I actually really don't like the smell of uncooked squash. But once it's cooked up, this is going to be really amazing. So now we're going to need some spices. It's about 3/4 of a tablespoon. Now this is close enough that I probably could have just put 1 teaspoon in each, but I'm just gonna think about it in recipe terms. So half in each here. There we go. And we're gonna need some black pepper. Pretty small measurement here. Just grind some out. It's like life, you just gotta grind it out. So we're going for 1/8 tablespoon in each. Perfect. Right, now, wonderful aromas and flavor. 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. It's going to give it that classic flavor. Same for paprika. So I defiled that 1/4 teaspoon. Just use our little spoon here to get it. There we go. And lastly, some ground allspice. Again, we're reaching for that 1/8 teaspoon measure. Giving it a real workout. Don't usually get to do that. Oh my goodness. Such amazing aroma. Getting very excited here. All right, a couple last things to finish out here. Give myself a little room because we need half of an apple. This is not a golden delicious. It just looks like one. I was told I needed to say that for reasons I don't entirely understand. But yeah, this is a really tasty apple, which is the important thing. The recipe just says something eating well. I'm just going to take the core out here. We are going to peel it. Okay, we have those peeled, and we're just gonna mince these up. Okay, let's grab our bowls again here. We're just gonna go half into each bowl. And you can see I started to forget that we're doing half of a half. So we just needed the 1/4 of the apple per each of these. Okay. So for our vegetarian option, just do a little bit of a mix here. The spices distributed. Wonderful. We'll do the same here. Cherries aren't stuck together as they like to do that. So we have one more thing to add to that. Let's get that taken care of and we'll be ready to go. Set aside my extra apple. Yum. Alright, and I have my pork here. The recipe calls for lamb. I think that would be pretty classic. You can use any meat, really, I think. I went with pork because it was convenient. I'm not the biggest fan of lamb. Well, I've been like a gyro or something, but in general, I'm happier to eat other things. So grab this pork stir fry meat, and it's already chopped up. I'm just gonna do a little slice on some of these bigger pieces. I kind of want smaller chunks here. Not too big of a deal. That's all I need to do. And let's go ahead and toss this in. Just gonna mix that around with my hand. Easier, I think. Perfect. So that is all set. I'm gonna grab my pumpkin here, and I am just going to fill it with this mixture. There we go. Set in here for a second. Actually, I'm gonna clear my pork cutting board out of my way now. Alright, just grabbing a baking sheet here. David S. pumpkins here. I'm gonna put my lid on. And these are gonna bake in the oven for about 3 hours at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. So this pumpkin has a pretty round bottom, my sweet dumpling squash. But it seems to sit pretty stable in this orientation. So you can slice off a rounded portion if you need it, but I think because it's stable, I'll try to keep it intact. Take off his little hat there, and let's get our other mixture in. Spices all end up in there. All that amazing flavor. Okay, perfect. So, last step, we are going to fill these with broth. So I have a vegetable broth for my vegetable pumpkin. We're going with 1/3 of a cup per squash. Just pour this in. Be happy and moist. That rice can absorb that liquid. And take the top off this fella. And for this, I have a chicken broth. Again, 1/3 of a cup. Pour that into Mr. Pumpkin. Everybody's situated in there. Now the recipe calls for garlic broth, and you can of course have any broth you want, like we're doing here. And I almost did the garlic broth. It's pretty simple. Take 2 full heads of garlic, slice them along their equator, and then you're gonna fry those in some oil in a pan for a few minutes till they get toasty. You add a couple quarts of water and simmer that for like an hour to get the flavor into the broth and then strain it out. Now that seemed like an interesting thing to try. I've never done it that way, but I decided to just keep it simple and go with a pre-made broth for these. Alright, the finishing touch. We're going to add a pat of butter to each one of these. Richen things up while it cooks in there. Alright. Now, let's get them covered again. Okay. And our beautiful little squash, they are ready to go into the oven. So let's get those baking. Alright, for our beverage today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to stay on theme by making a recipe from the same cookbook. We're actually going to do 2 different things here. And what we're making is an infused vodka. We're going to do 2 different variants. And the book has recipes to use these in different cocktails. I think I know which one I'm going to make, but I'm going to go ahead and create both infusions and we'll see what I end up using. So this is a make ahead step. We're going to start infusing this vodka for a few days before we then use it in our finished cocktail. Alright, so what 2 things are we going to make? Well, the first is very simple. It's going to be cocoa vodka infused with cocoa nibs. And this will avoid having it be very sweet like a lot of chocolate liqueurs. And the other one we're going to make will be infused with a variety of botanicals, different aromatic spices and seeds, some cinnamon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out these spices into this bowl here, and then we're going to do a quick toast to really bring out the essence of those spices before we combine them with the vodka. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So first ingredient will be some whole allspice. I'll take some of these allspice berries. And we want 1.5 teaspoons. Should be about right. particular ingredients. So what's interesting about this vodka infused with botanicals, we're basically making a gin. Gin is just an unflavored spirit that's then infused with botanicals, specifically juniper, among other things. I think the word gin comes from kind of an earlier form of the alcohol Jennifer from the Netherlands, or that being the word for juniper, which then morphed into gin. Of course, there are a lot of different ways to make it, but juniper is the primary flavoring. So in a sense, this is like a Russian gin, if you will. And again, going for 1.5 teaspoons. There are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, so I'm just using this to make it easy, doing about half. And then we'll switch to our 1/2 teaspoon measure for our black peppercorn. Very fragrant. A similar measure of whole coriander seeds. And then we also have fenugreek seeds. A nice fragrance from those as well. Okay, so we have our allspice, juniper, black peppercorns, coriander, and fenugreek. So we're just about there. To this, we're going to add a cinnamon stick. One whole clove, and lastly, some star anise. As this is pretty potent, and I think the recipe wants slightly less than 1 star anise, gonna break that up and just add those bits. Now, it is worth noting that this is the amount for a full batch, and I'm just going to be using half the bottle of vodka, the recipe amount. So this normally steeps for 4 days. Because I'm using the full recipe's worth of spice mix. It could be more potent, so I'm going to be testing it. It probably won't steep as long. And the reason I'm doing it this way is that, as you've seen, some of these, like a clove, are harder to break down into a half portion. Just a little bit easier to measure out this way. So we're going to take this over to the stove and toast these spices before we finish up. So I will set this aside, and now we will prepare our cocoa nib infused vodka. I've got some nibs. These come from Hawaii. Really wonderful product. You can smell that great cocoa flavor. We're going to add 1 tablespoon. A wee bit extra, a wee bit of spillage. No big deal. Okay. Those are our nibs. So let's grab our vodka. I have Monopolova. It's a nice vodka, still pretty affordable. And because I want to do half of this 750 milliliter bottle, I'm going to pour out 375 milliliter. All right, and we'll leave that ready for our spice-infused vodka, which she calls Hunter's vodka. But this we will take and we will pour into our jar here. Pretty simple stuff. And we'll just leave this to infuse for a few days. Okay. Let's toast those spices. Alright, this is a pretty straightforward operation. Just gonna put the skillet here on medium heat. And we're just gonna toast these for a minute or two, just to get them blooming, get those incredible aromas coming out of the spices, activating those wonderfully fragrant oils. Pretty straightforward. Just want to make sure we don't burn them. All right, let's go ahead and add. All right, so we are toasting. And right away, I'm starting to get those beautiful, spicy fragrances. These are just really magical smells, very wintry, Christmas time kind of thing. The cocktail recipe for this is kind of like a mulled wine, sangria, using these kind of Christmas spices, playing on that idea. Nice, Soviet twist. Yeah, it smells really good. Really, really good. Don't need much more here. I just want these a little bit toasty. And like I said, the thing you don't want here is to burn them, so not going to be too aggressive here. All right. Since I'm getting some good aromas, I'm just going to take these off, and we'll get them steeping. Okay, some nice toasted spices. Let's get these steeping away. All right, Operation Toasted Spices is complete. So let's get going here. I'm gonna use this jar. I'm just going to deposit those in there. And we're going to take our bottle of vodka and just pour it over those spices. And of course can just finish this in this jar, but I'm going to hold on to the bottle. Or you can put the finished product in there if you want to have it, available to serve that way from the bottle versus this random jar. So both of these are just going to steep for a few days, and we'll finish them with a little bit of sweetener, and you'll be seeing that shortly. So let's let our Hunter's vodka do its thing. All right, let's take a quick look at the cookbook that I've gotten this recipe from. It's Kachka by Bonnie Morales. So her family originally comes from Belarus, which was part of the Soviet Union. immigrated to the United States, and she's a first generation child of immigrant parents. And the concept for her restaurant is not Russian food, which I think at first glance that's what it appears to be. And, even the subtitle notes a return to Russian cooking. But the concept is really the food of the former Soviet Union. So that covers a lot of ground, because the Soviet Union was an absolutely massive expanse of territory, covering a huge number of nations and peoples and cultures. So not at all a monoculture that we might sometimes think of from images of the days of the Soviet Union. So recipes can be found in the book for a variety of different cultures that fell under that umbrella. I really like this cookbook. There are some delicious recipes, but it also offers some wonderful insight into a history and culture, and beautiful images, but also these really kind of entertaining guides to how things worked in the Soviet Union, things you might have found, how people ate, what the sort of food culture was like. So there are beverages. We'll pop to, I think we went right. What we're making is cacao nib vodka, which will translate into a white Russian. And then our Hunter's vodka that we've been working on. So you'll find a lot of things that are very, what we might think of as Russian, particular style. Beet caviar stuffed eggs, for instance. Moldovan eggplant salad. This is delicious. But one of my favorite things is among the tidbits of culture and history, a look at the grift run by members of Soviet society. Essentially, if your nation wasn't providing for you, they had to find ways to get by and find the things they need. So a complicated black market and set of trades to obtain goods. But I think one of the most interesting things is noting this is not just everyone stealing for themselves, but a community activity, everyone helping each other to get what they need. We'll have a quick look at our recipe here. For these Armenian Pumpkin Dolmas, we'll see if mine are as beautiful. And she writes, "This might come as a surprise, but dolmas are not just stuffed grape leaves. A dolma refers to any stuffed vegetable, from the Middle East to the Balkans to the Caucasus. Here pumpkins or winter squash are stuffed with clove, a Central Asian take on rice pilaf. The warming cinnamon and cooling fresh mint, rich lamb and tart sour cherries, all bathing the rice in baked squash, Needless to say, your kitchen will smell amazing. You can easily omit the lamb to make a spectacular side for a holiday table or a vegetarian-friendly main course. So we're trying that today as a variation, and we'll see how it turns out. One of my other favorite bits is the section on Russian dumplings, variety of cultures within Russia, pelmeni, and I think I would like to do these for the channel. This book actually got me to buy the pelmenitsa, this crazy hexagonal dumpling mold. It does require some kind of vigorous rolling out with that mold, which isn't the best for ASMR, but let me know if you think we should do some really fantastic traditional dumplings. I often like making those around Christmas time, so we'll see. Anyway, that's a quick look at this wonderful cookbook, and let's get back to it. Alright, so this Hunter's vodka has been steeping, and I've been checking on it. I think we're ready. Like I said, giving it just a couple days because we had that extra volume of spices. So I'm gonna have a quick taste just to see where we're at. Yeah, it's nice and spicy from all that. Definitely getting that spice aroma too, so I think we're in a very happy place here. So want to stop that steeping process, get those spices out of there, and do our finishing step here. So I've got a strainer. I'm just gonna pour this in. Okay. Make sure we got liquid out of there. All right, so we have our infused vodka, all of those incredibly fragrant spices. And like I said, I've reserved the bottle to hold this. Pop our lid off here. And this is gonna get just a touch of sweetness to go with it. I've got maple syrup. Wonderful, pure, grade A. We're gonna do half a tablespoon. The full recipe would be, of course, a tablespoon. I'm just gonna add this into the bottle here. So nice. And then I'm gonna pour this in, but I don't trust myself doing that. So what I'm going to do is grab a sheet of parchment here. I'm just going to roll it up into a cone so I can get basically a funnel. Since I don't have a funnel. Parchment cornetto here. Slide this in. And let's trim this down so it came out gigantic. Alright, then I'm just going to pour into there. Alright, a little bit of fun fluid dynamics there at the end. Last bits came out of the spout. Alright, so we've mixed our vodka with our maple syrup. Get our lid back on there. We're just gonna shake this to mix up, dissolve that maple syrup. Okay, and our Hunter's vodka is done. Looks more like a whiskey now, but we can be super popular at all of the parties this holiday season. Alright, so our cocoa nib vodka has been steeping for a number of days. I think it's ready. Crack it open. Gonna give it a wee taste just to make sure. Nice. Smooth out the edge of the vodka a little bit and you get those chocolatey notes, but definitely not sweet. So we are going to add just a little bit of sweet to the final product, but let's get these nibs strained out first. Doing a lot of straining in this episode. We would have done more if we'd done the garlic stock. Here we are. Alright, so we're just gonna pour this in. Alright, we've got our nibs out of there. Did a quick rinse just to, so I wasn't pounding on the jar here to finish that out. Okay, so we won't be needing those anymore. Just make sure we get all of our wonderful product out of there. Alright, so we want to add a tiny bit of sweetness here. So I have a simple syrup. This is just 1-to-1 sugar and water that we're going to use for our sweetener. I make a rich syrup, which is 2 to 1 sugar to water, but it needs to be heated. A lot of bars might use that for some of their cocktails. But here we're just using a simple, I'm going to pour out half tablespoon. I didn't trust myself to pour directly out of the other measuring cup. And we'll have that in reserve for the cocktail we're doing. So that's just a little bit of sweetener. Take the edge off here. Back into the jar with our cocoa infused vodka. Put the lid back on. Let's just shake this up. Mix that sugar syrup in. Okay, and that is our infused cocoa nib vodka. Alright, so for our cocktail, you got a sneak preview of this. But we are going to make a white Russian. Of course, white forces were affiliated with the Tsar in opposition to the Bolshevik Reds during the Russian Revolution. So, keeping things light when it comes to cocktail hour. So we're going to go with 1.5 ounces of this amazing infused vodka. There we go. And this is certainly a drink that you could build in the glass. I feel like that's fairly typical. But we're going to give it that little extra touch here. And make it in this mixing glass. We can stir and dilute and then add to our serving glass. Alright, so I've got 1.5 ounces in here, and I need 1/2 ounce of simple syrup. I'm just going to go ahead and add it to this to top this off. And we'll add all that into here. We have some coffee liqueur. Go 3/4 of an ounce. Add that in as well. And then we have some chocolate bitters, Aztec chocolate bitters, which is key. The recipe calls for a particular brand's mole bitters. These are in the ballpark. I want a fancy few drops. We're just going to do a real light dash here. Be close enough. And that's one of the things that I really like about this recipe for a white Russian. It can be kind of a one-note drink, just with kind of the sweet, creamy coffee flavor. But having that cocoa-infused vodka and a little bit of spicy bitters, I think just makes this thing kind of a magical sort of thing. Black Russian, of course, you could leave out that sweetener and you'd just have that vodka and coffee liqueur and those bitters if you want that extra spicy note. Alright, so let's get some ice in here and stir this. right. Mr. Strainer. And let's add some ice to the beverage. And now for the White Russian part. Some half and half. We just kind of want to float that in there like that. All right. A beautiful White Russian. You know, there may be a lot of turmoil around the world, but never forget, the dude abides. That is so tasty. All right, we have pulled our pumpkins out of the oven. The lid of the sugar pumpkin has kind of shrunken up under cooking and settled a bit, but these look nice and happy. I'm gonna take our sweet dumpling and let's go ahead and finish our preparation here. I'm gonna take off the top and let's go ahead and open this up to see what we've got. How about that? Absolutely beautiful, so fragrant. We have a little finishing touch here. Tip these back because I have some fresh mint. I'm just gonna tear up and sprinkle onto this for that final hit of fragrance and flavor. And that